Welcome to Fantasy Filmball. My name is Dyl, and if you're new to our channel or if you're a long-time subscriber, thank you so much for tuning in today. Typically on this channel, we talk awards season, whether that's through prediction videos, my co-host Matt and I attending one of the major film festivals across the globe, or myself bringing you the latest reviews for all the hottest Oscar titles contending for glory. But today is my yearly excursion away from awards and towards the box office. Even before I fell in love with the Academy, I've always been enamored by the enigma that is the box office. Charting and legs and everything that goes into tracking how a film either becomes a success or a flop. And honestly, the most interesting time in the yearly calendar for the box office is the summer slate. It's where the studios all band together to release some of their biggest, boldest, and hopefully most profitable flicks of the entire year. Over the last few years on this channel, I've brought you my yearly predictions, and as you can see on the graphic right next to me, some years I'm really good at it, other years, there's a lot to be desired. Going back to my very first predictions I brought to you on Fantasy Filmball, honestly, this is the best year I've had. I got everything, 10 for 10, perfect lineup, at least in terms of getting films into the top 10 that made the domestic top 10. I even got 4 of those in the exact right spot, which is a lot easier said than done, as the rest of my history really shows. 2023, on paper, it may look like I did pretty well. 9 out of 10 accurate films in the top 10, but if we look closer, I was really off of where those films would eventually land. At the top of my list, I had films like The Little Mermaid and Indiana Jones and The Dial of Destiny, while I barely had flicks like Barbie or Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse even in my top 10 domestically. And of course, no one had Sound of Freedom, but what I had in its slot was honestly one of the biggest bombs of that summer or any summer since COVID, being The Flash. And that moves us into the next year where I kind of say I had my worst summer predictions of all time. I was a believer in Kevin Costner. I thought that the Horizon Saga would ride the new wave of long-form entertainment being brought to the cinemas. We've seen all the religious episodic releases pull this off. We even saw the Stranger Things season finale dominating this model just this year, but Costner's Western Saga just did not connect with audiences. In fact, I didn't just put one of them in my top 10. I put both of them in my top 10. And to make it even worse, one of those movies has still yet to release theatrically. But I can say I at least got the #1 movie of that summer correct, which was Inside Out 2. I picked that over Deadpool and Wolverine, so at least, I get a W right there. And then going to last year, overly, I can't be too upset with my performance. I got 8 out of 10 films correct, and honestly, even if I didn't have many in the exact spots, you plug and play, you mix and match a few of those placements, and then you can make it look really nice. If I put something at 6, then it came at 7. Put something at 2, then it came at #1. My biggest pitfall last year was hedging my bets. I went on and on about how there's always a surprise horror flick and there's always an extra animated movie that just sticks around for your top 10. And so I doubled down. I was like, do I want to guess the wrong horror movie or the wrong animated film? And I was like, well, what if I go for both animated movies? What if I go for Elio and The Bad Guys too, thinking at least one of them had to make the top 10, and it didn't. And I also couldn't decide between Weapons and Final Destination Bloodlines as to which one would hit the zeitgeist harder, and as history has told us, both of them did. Elio was a massive flop, and Bad Guys 2 just barely missed out. Not just barely, it wasn't even that close to making our top 10 of the domestic summer box office last year. Which brings us to 2026, and this year, if you can't already tell by this video so far, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. It's no secret, the king, the ruler, the influencer of the box office space is Dan Murrell. He originated this game all the way back in his Screen Junkies days, and we're just all playing our own versions of his creation. So I would highly encourage all of you out there who enjoy box office content, if you don't already, go check out his channel, his top 10, because sadly, we tend to line up a little bit pretty similarly over the years, and sometimes that rewards us, sometimes we fail together. But I think this year he's doing a very interesting model where he's giving extra points for getting the film in the exact right spot, and you're dinged a little bit where you may have the film in your top 10, but it's quite a few places off from where you had it. So I think that's a very cool way to adapt the model. It's a way that I think we should all, as box office enjoyers, follow in Dan's footsteps. Because with all that being said, my #1 movie of the summer is Toy Story 5. And yes, I do understand that last year Lilo and Stitch set the box office on fire, being the latest Disney live-action remake, largely due to the fact that the animated film is such a mainstay in children of all ages' routine viewing habits. Lilo and Stitch is often ranked among the highest streamed films on Disney+. If you go to any of the Disney theme parks, that little blue alien is arguably their best-selling IP outside of the iconic mouse himself. So you may say, let's go with the summer live-action remake this year, but unlike Lilo and Stitch, I feel like there's a lot less buzz, a lot less people clamoring, a lot less excitement, and nearly not as much conversation around that film. However, Disney does have another juggernaut hitting cinemas up their sleeve this summer, and that's the latest chapter of the Toy Story franchise, Toy Story 5. Woody, Buzz, the whole gang, they're reuniting, this time having to face the fears of kids' addictions to their electronic devices. And I know people say Toy Story 4 was not the talk of the town, blah, 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 but as someone who was in college in 2019, that movie was absolutely a general audience sensation. Whether it was your grandparents, your classmates, their parents, your parents, or even younger siblings, everyone wanted to see the newest Toy Story movie, and for the most part, everyone came out saying, I really enjoyed that movie. I oftentimes feel like, especially in this Oscar sphere, this bubble that we're all in, we're all very similar types of moviegoers. I think Michael is a great example of this that we're seeing right now at the box office. You may consider yourself someone who enjoys high art, but for myself, and I would say the large amount of moviegoers at large, we want something that's fun, that tugs at our heartstrings, and is recognizable, and Toy Story does all of those in droves. We have countless films as example, and I mean, just going back 2 years ago to Inside Out 2, I could see Toy Story 5 having a very similar explosion at this year's summer box office. So if Toy Story 5 is in my number 1 slot, it's pretty clear what film I have at number 2, because I would say it's the odds-on favorite to be predicted atop of the summer box office, and it's the latest MCU entry, Spider-Man Brand New Day. And in my history of following the box office and being a fan of this niche corner of the internet, the odds-on favorite does sometimes come out victorious at the end of the summer. I mean, last summer, it was just Lilo and Stitch. In 2021, it just was Black Widow. In 2019, it just was The Lion King. Those top dogs still do fantastic numbers, and even if they don't come in the number 1 spot, look at stuff like Deadpool and Wolverine or Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. They rake in that money. But sometimes a film just hits that cultural zeitgeist a little bit more, has a little bit more staying power and legs overall, and can overtake the more hype film that has the higher opening weekend. And I have no doubts that Brand New Day is going to be a very successful film for both Sony and Marvel, especially considering the huge superhero genre fatigue at large right now, which saw a pretty rough 2025. However, unlike No Way Home, at least at the moment, there's no major cameos expected to help boost the box office here and repeat viewings, and unlike Far From Home, the film won't be riding the coattails of the biggest MCU entry of all time, but you can kind of flip that around to say, this is the prelude, the intro to their next biggest installment with Doomsday right around the corner. Marvel, Disney, they would be insane not to roll out some sort of early promo to help amplify Spider-Man's box office. In my eyes, this is going to be a very tight race for the number 1 and number 2 spots. I could see either Toy Story or Spider-Man being the king of the summer 2026 box office crown, but currently my chips lie with old reliable. We have Woody, we have Buzz, we have the Pixar gang, while your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is swinging just behind them in number 2 with the silver. Taking a step down our podium of 2026, we find Christopher Nolan's latest film, The Odyssey. This is the only movie on this list I already have my tickets for. In fact, I was lucky enough to secure this lovely very first IMAX 70mm screening in New York City. The very first public screening, may I add at that. But of all the films that we're talking about today, this is my most anticipated movie. Partially, that's why I have it so high up on this list. But beyond that, I think a lot of people share that same sentiment. People are clamoring for the opportunity to watch Christopher Nolan's adaptation of The Odyssey. Tickets dropped unannounced on a random weeknight at midnight over a year in advance and sold out within minutes. The hype is there. The anticipation could not be higher. Maybe third place is a little bit too high considering the runtime could push towards 3 hours. The rating is still undetermined, but I just think that this movie's too big to fail. Universal is pulling out all the stops for the promotional campaign so far, and I can only see it growing from here as we get closer to the release. We've had Super Bowl teasers, teasers. We've had collaborations with LeBron and Bronny James, tickets dropping a year in advance. Everything has been met with overwhelmingly excitement. And while I personally don't see The Odyssey placing any higher than third, maybe there's a world where this drops a few spots, but I feel pretty confident putting my faith in a Christopher Nolan film as my bronze medal, my third place for my summer 2026 predictions. Now, The Odyssey may be my most anticipated movie of this summer, but if you know me, you know this channel, you know our Discord server, which you can join the link down in the description, you know I'm a man of my Minions, and Minions and Monsters is the newest installment in the MCU, the Minions Cinematic Universe. And here's the thing with these movies. They are so consistent at the box office. Sure, maybe each installment dips slightly, but they are all highly profitable films that work extremely well for their core demographic. The brain rot youth of America, their families. I see no reason why this film would suddenly fall off a cliff. The last Minions film came in 4th. The last Despicable Me movie came in the top 5, so why not have the newest Minions land in the top 5 as well? Just like The Odyssey, I can't really see this one going much higher in the placements, but I think 4th place is a pretty solid spot for it. Now, if we really want to analyze the Minions movie, you could argue this film might be hurt by the exclusion of Gru or some of the notable Minions that we've all grown to love, or for most of you out there probably hate. But this is an entirely new batch of little yellow guys. Maybe that works in the film's favor, maybe it hurts it. But I don't really think anyone's going to see the Minions movie care which Minions they are following. Who knows? We may even get another gentle Minion type viral moment. I mean, this one could even be bigger than the chicken jockey trend. And those all sound like positives to me when we're talking about generating box office revenue. Now we hit the halfway spot of our top 10 for summer 2026, and I have to return to that movie I was talking a little bit earlier at the number 1 spot, because it's Disney's live action remake of Moana. Last year, I admit, I got burned by being a little bit too overzealous on How to Train Your Dragon. Between how many people in my demographic call it their favorite animated movie of all time, how those films have only grown in popularity since the series concluded with a whole theme park land opening at Epic Universe last year, to unanimous praise, strong streaming numbers, and solid buzz for the remake. But with all that, it only managed to come in 5th place last year. And now Moana on paper is a much stronger movie than How to Train Your Dragon ever was. The Rock is coming back. We just had a sequel to the animated film make over $1 billion, and both Moana and Moana 2 are mainstays at the top of the Disney Plus charts. However, unlike Lilo and Stitch, is there really an overwhelming desire to see these characters in a new format? We hadn't had any Stitch content in over 10 years. We just got another Moana film 2 years ago. Plus, whether if you're a high art critic, you're a normie like myself, or someone who just sees one movie a year, I feel like everyone's pretty much in agreement. This trailer looks a little bit weird, a little bit uncanny. You can even argue The Rock looks a little off-putting with a CGI body, and I'm sure people will still show up. I'm sure this will still be hugely profitable, but I could see this landing more in line with films like The Little Mermaid or The Jungle Book, rather than hitting the highs of The Lion King or Beauty and the Beast. Year after year, the opening weekend of the summer box office usually gives us one of our biggest juggernauts of the entire season. This logic, though, has led me astray before. The Fall Guy, very fun movie, but did not really turn out that well in terms of box office prospects. And then we have movies like Aladdin that set the world on fire. This year, though, we're given and we're presented with The Devil Wears Prada 2, a film that by all accounts should explode when it releases. The original film is kind of a cult classic. Maybe cult isn't the right type of word because it made a lot of money upon its release, but people genuinely love and adore this movie. It's a mainstay in pop culture. It's instantly quotable, insanely recognizable, and hugely influential. The whole cast is back, and all 4 of its leads now are Oscar nominees after Emily Blunt finally got her moment to shine with Oppenheimer. We've got the original director and screenwriters returning. Overall, the only major change in its creative team is the costume designer, but the new one still worked on the original, just not in the lead role. But by all accounts, this should be a cultural sensation with strong audience scores, and I would assume very incredible, model-like legs for this type of film. I could see a world where this climbs all the way up to the number 3 spot, and honestly, putting it at 6 feels way too low, but I don't know what I would move down. Is my personal bias for The Odyssey making me place it too high? Even outside the Oscar bubble, I just feel like this is one of the most anticipated films of the summer at large. The Minions are just so consistent, and even if Moana underperforms a bit, I think that still puts in the $250 to $300 million range domestically. So yeah, I could sit here and admit that 6th place is definitely too low for The Devil Wears Prada 2, but I don't know where I can realistically push it higher. So I'll throw it to you guys out there. Let me know in the comments, how high do you have The Devil Wears Prada 2 on your summer top 10 list, and which film am I currently predicting a little bit too high? COVID-19 obviously changed a lot of things for general audiences and their attendance at the box office. And one thing I would never have imagined pre-pandemic is the fact that a theatrically Star Wars movie would feel like a dime a dozen. And the majority of people are expecting it to absolutely flop at the box office. The Mandalorian and Grogu head off on their next adventure, and this time it's not on your television screen, but on the silver screen, the biggest of screens, the IMAX, the Dolby, the 4DX. Star Wars is back in theaters. And the question has to become, will this movie flop? And if it does, how low can it go? And is it low enough to potentially miss the top 10 films of the entire summer? Personally, I'm not in that camp that the movie's gonna go that low and outright bomb. I think it should do more than Solo. I mean, The Mandalorian and Grogu have a very strong built-in fan base and goodwill from their television run, as well as the people who see them over at the Disney parks. That should help carry them to at least a strong opening weekend with some solid legs throughout the summer. With that being said, I don't see it climbing that high in the rankings. Maybe it could overtake The Devil Wears Prada 2, or if the Minions fall off a cliff, or Moana is just outright rejected, but I feel like number 5 is probably its ceiling. But with me placing it at the number 7 spot, it makes me one of the more optimistic predictors that I've seen out there for the summer top 10 list, which is kind of an insane thing to say out loud. It's a Star Wars movie, it's a Disney Lucas event film, and even Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny still made the top 7 of its respective summer, and that film was pretty widely panned. I just think people are lashing out a little bit too hard against Mando, and there's still some gas left in this tank, and I think they can soar up and get to number 7 of this year's summer top 10 list. With that being said, though, the top 7 are 7 films I personally think everyone should have in their top 7. They could just have the freedom of choice and rearrange those orders based on how their personal predictions may play out. However, spots 8, 9, and 10 are where things I think can really open up for everyone. But for me, this is where I can get a little creative and make some fun wildcard picks. And like I say, every year there's at least one surprise horror feature film that sneaks its way up into the top 10. And this year, I'm planting my flag. I think it's A24. They're going to surpass the total gross of Money Supreme and crown a new highest grossing film from the studio all time with The Backrooms. And then some of you out there, this makes total sense. And for others, you'll probably think, I lost it. But look at things like Five Nights at Freddy's, Sonic the Hedgehog, Minecraft, Mario. These are all properties that connect heavily with younger audiences who show up on opening weekend, who go back for repeat viewings, who bring friends, who bring family, and they make it known, this is my stuff. And I get Backrooms is going to be more adult skewing, but I think that's just going to work more and more for the movie's favor, especially if this movie's good, which from all accounts, it seems like it might be. It could also pull in those horror fans and even general audiences who are just curious about the buzzy new thing. It's kind of wild that it took until the number 8 slot to get to an original movie on this top 10 list, but The Backrooms feels like a sky's the limit type contender. If the hype is real, if the superfans show out, if A24 nails the marketing push, I could see this getting dangerously close to Money Supreme's total domestic gross just in its opening weekend. And for me, it's not a question of will The Backrooms become the highest grossing A24 film of all time. It's more of a question of how high can it climb in this year's summer box office rankings. The other day, I was messaging in our Discord channel, finalizing this list, saying I feel really good about my top 8 movies. Sure, I could shift the order around a little bit, but those felt locked in. Spots 9 and 10 is where I had no real idea what to do. So let me walk you through some of the films I'm debating between. You can kind of form your own opinions based off of what I say. And at the end, I can let you know which 2 I ultimately decide to put inside my top 10 list. And I think we should just go through these in theatrically released order. So the first one's going to be Mortal Kombat 2 from the big WB. They've been test screening the hell out of this movie. And I feel like I've been seeing fan events and public screenings for like 2 years now. Clearly, the filmmakers, this studio, want to get the new Mortal Kombat movie right. They want to deliver one for the fans. The last Mortal Kombat movie, I'd argue, was a success for the time it released. It was one of those day-and-date films Warner Brothers was rolling out post-pandemic, and it did draw an audience. Now, was that audience completely in love with what they got? Not exactly, but I think this time around, Warner has recognized that. They have the built-in crowd that will show up. Now they're aiming for repeat viewings and trying to bring in new fans. The question is, can they actually pull that off? Next up, we have the return of one of the biggest auteurs of all time. Steven Spielberg has returned to summer blockbuster mode. You can say what you want about the box office performance of his recent films, but they've all been very well received. In fact, Best Picture nominees. Consistently strong critical scores, audience reception is usually pretty high, with the box office just hasn't been there so far, but Spielberg is someone who delivers. The real question is, do audiences still care? Disclosure Day is a film that, much like The Odyssey, has been going hard with its promo. Shout out Universal, they're behind both these movies, but my concern is whether people actually show up for a new original Spielberg sci-fi film. What does the opening weekend look like? Are there repeat viewings? Do the legs hold? I could see this going the way of The Fall Guy. A ton of buzz leading into opening weekend, only for it to stall out immediately. Even though The Fall Guy had decent legs, the opening was just way too low to recover and ultimately missed out on the top 10 by just a few $1 million. So I would say if you're betting on Disclosure Day, you're hoping for a performance more like Nope, a film that had a very solid opening weekend for a film of its kind, followed by some solid holds week to week. It needs to open high enough to establish itself as a real player, because after that, even if the legs aren't amazing, it can ride out the summer and just stay in the conversation and just stay in the race. And now, I may talk about how Spielberg is someone who delivers quality films and the audience doesn't always show out. Our next entry is kind of the opposite, because we have the brand new Scary Movie and for the first time in over a decade, with the original cast and crew all returning. But here's the thing for me, comedies are in a very rough spot at the box office right now. We just had The Naked Gun last year, which some people, including myself, would say is on par, if not better than the original iconic films, and that barely made a dent at the box office. I think it did break even, but it was nowhere near being a contender for the top 10 films of the summer box office last year. But unlike The Naked Gun, Scary Movie clearly has a marketing push, and its online awareness, I feel like, is through the roof at this moment. This is a film I feel like could potentially, its opening weekend, could be on par with its total gross of some of its previous installments if the hype all cements itself at the perfect moment. I just feel like everyone and their mother grew up watching at least one, if not all, of these movies, and just like The Devil Wears Prada, they become such an integral part of the cultural zeitgeist that they're hard to ignore. I just think very similar to Disclosure Day, this is a film where if you're putting in your top 10, you need to bet on a big opening weekend and then hope for good legs to kind of help it survive each and every week, because a lot of those films I mentioned up in our top 7 are going to be massive openers, and these spots 8, 9, and 10 are really going to rely on word of mouth and longevity. And I just don't know if a Spielberg film or a Scary Movie film is going to require so many repeated viewings, especially if the word of mouth isn't as unanimous as you would want it to be. This next movie, though, is the movie I feel like everyone's probably yelling at me for not including in my top 8, and that is the newest from DC. Shout out Supergirl. I'm going to be honest, I'm going to lay my cards on the table. I've heard this movie is rough. Rough. From multiple trusted sources. There's been test screenings for different versions for months now. I think we're nearing double-digit test screenings, which is like unheard of, and I just feel like Warner Brothers is nervous about what they have. So the question becomes, will the goodwill from Superman plus the lack of other superhero films this summer besides Spider-Man be enough of a reason to help carry Supergirl to a strong opening weekend and for repeat business viewing? Or does it suffer the fate of summer films like The Flash or Aquaman 2 or even Venom 3, where the poor word of mouth kills it early and it never really recovers and takes off? And I just don't know. Supergirl is a film I feel like fading, but I do understand most people currently have it, not just in their top 10, but in their top 7, even above Mandalorian and Grogu. And we have one more film I really want to mention here, and in my opinion, it's the biggest wild card of the summer at whole. A movie that could be the next Horizon or the next Sound of Falling. And if you know that range, we're talking anywhere between 30 million and close to 300 million. That's a massive gap. But that film is Young Washington from Angel Studios, releasing on the July 4th weekend. Angel Studios is once again targeting that American holiday crowd, just like they did for Sound of Falling. That film came out of nowhere and succeeded partially because of its competition. Dial of Destiny, it wasn't connecting with audiences, while Sound of Freedom absolutely did with its intended target demo. They brought their friends, they brought their families, they brought their churches, and they ran those numbers up. So my question really becomes, can Young Washington repeat that, or its competition, those other films that come out in late June and early July, are going to be strong enough where if this has some mixed reception, if it's not unanimous 10 out of 10s, the audience just goes searching for other alternatives. Or just does it follow the recent trend of those Angel Studio releases where they perform well within inside their niche, but they don't break out to a general audience? In my opinion, Young Washington is a very fun swing. It's a risky pick. It's one I want to take in my top 10. It's just, there's a lot of options right here, and that's why before I recap the top 10 films I have of the summer, I do want to mention some other ones because these ones I have a little bit less confidence in, but they're still worth a mention. The first one we have is a bit of a Barbenheimer reunion, a clash of the different types of films involving dinosaurs. End of Oak Street for the big kids, Paw Patrol 3 for the little kids. They release on the same day. Paw Patrol, it has this built-in audience. They make their money. They make a good amount of it, but I think it's capped. I don't think it can get over the hurdle to make inside the top 10. And the End of Oak Street feels like a film that does have buzz. But is it enough buzz to truly break out? Every year there's usually at least one August surprise that sneaks into the top 10 due to weaker competition, and maybe that is the End of Oak Street. Maybe I personally should put it a little bit higher, but I just don't know if it's there currently. I really want to see this film show up at Cannes out of competition to show Warner, the studio, has confidence in the movie. Maybe it could still be added, but it has yet to be added so far. And the other film I want to talk about here is our last official release of the summer. It's going to be the new Insidious film. We've heard some reports that this film could be the best in the franchise, and we just saw actually how well the Conjuring movie did. It absolutely crushed at the box office, and I wasn't even considering this in my top 10, but now that I'm sitting here talking to myself, talking to the camera, I kind of want to sneak this into my top 10. And it's like, do I take out something like Scary Movie 6, Disclosure Day, Young Washington, Supergirl? Like, what should I take out to make this fit in my top 10? Because it could it's the newest entry and could ride the wave of the momentum of the franchise. And I mean, like I just said, The Conjuring boasted a series best number even after some very mixed and less than stellar films. And I mean, Insidious franchise could just recreate that same glory in late August this year. So yeah, let's do it. Let's throw up this graphic right now. You can see my top 10 movies I'm predicting for the summer box office season. Toy Story 5 at my number 1, Spider-Man Brand New Day at number 2, The Odyssey at number 3, Minions and Monsters and Moana round up my top 5, Devil Wears Prada 2, Mandalorian and Grogu, The Back Room, Scary Movie 6, and Insidious out of the further round out my top 10, with my honorable mentions being Mortal Kombat 2, Disclosure Day, Supergirl, Young Washington, and The End of Oak Street. And yeah, there you have it. Those are my top 10 films I am predicting for the summer 2026 box office. I got some original picks. I'm going with consensus for some. I feel like Toy Story 5 is not the common pick for number 1, so maybe that bites me 2 years in a row. Or maybe I reign the glory and the supreme and the victory just like I did for Inside Out 2 over Deadpool and Wolverine. Backrooms is a movie I know I'm higher on than most. I have at my number 8, and I don't have Supergirl. I don't have Disclosure Day in my top 10. Will those come back to bite me? But I want to hear what your predictions are out there. Drop them down in the comments below. Give me your 1 through 10. If you want to play along with us, join the Discord down below and submit your predictions there. We're going to have everyone's together, and we'll all come back at the end of the season and see who is the box office predicting champion. But until next time, my name's Dyl. This has been Fantasy Filmball. Peace.